Okay.
So, is it on?
Yeah, but we're losing your head. Okay.
So Egypt, in Hebrew, is Mitzrayim. And Mitzrayim comes from tsar. The root of that is tsar, narrow. So the exile, okay, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about exile, but the exile into Egypt was an exile into a certain narrowness. Okay? And the Hasidic literature talks a lot about this. Even in Hebrew there's a term of Rosh Gadol. You have like an open mind, you can create a creative mind, you can think big. And you have Rosh Katan, a narrow mind. You can't see beyond what's in front of you. You can't see beyond this day to day, and in order to believe, in order to have faith, you have to see beyond what's in front of you. In the slavery in Egypt was slaves see what's in front of them. They don't think big. They think about survival. They think about the next meal, the next task, the next work.
Well, that's one of the things that Pharaoh tried to do with all the forced labor, was to put the Hebrews into a position where they couldn't think about anything else other than the work that they were doing.
So that was a certain narrowness, and on a spiritual level, exile is taking you out of a certain freedom of thinking, a certain closeness to God, a certain Rosh Gadol, this open mind, and putting you into a narrow place which is distant from God. So on a personal level, right, everyone, can get to this place, this narrow place. We all do. Not all the time, sometimes, maybe in the past. And this Seder, this night, is not only a redemption from Egypt, from Mitzrayim, but it's also a redemptive process from the Mitzrayim, from the narrow place to a place of freedom. Not necessarily only a national freedom, but also a personal freedom. So as we go through the Haggadah, we're going to be looking at all these levels that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so let's begin. And the first thing that we say the Kiddush, which is the Kadesh, the first part. And then the next piece we do is Halach Ma'anya. I'll just read it. It's actually in Aramaic. The reason why it's in Aramaic, because in the times of the Beit HaMikdash, that was the language of the people, Aramaic. Especially the second, even the first one also. So,
you're going to read this in English or Aramaic?
I'm going to read it in both. I'm going to do both. Halach Ma'anya. Lachma is lechem. Halach Ma'anya. This is the bread of affliction. Or you could also read it like a poor man's bread. Ani. Diachalo abahatana. I'm trying to find it here. What is it? Abahatana bi'ara de Mitzrayim. That our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. I should just say, actually, before we get to that even, we have these, the first 4 steps that we do before we even get to the Haggadah, which is Magid. Kadesh, Urchatz, where we break the matzah, the middle matzah, Karpas, we eat the vegetable, and Urchatz, we wash our hands before we eat the vegetable, and then Yachatz, we break the middle matzah. And then we come to Magid, which begins with Halach Ma'anya. So, halach ma'anya diachala v'hatana be'arad Mitzrayim. This is the bread of affliction or poverty that our fathers ate in the land of Egypt. Kol dichfin yetei be'echol, kol ditzrich yetei v'yifsach. Whoever, basically whoever is needy, he can come and join us. Come and have our Pesach with us. Hashata hacha l'shana haba ba'arad Yisrael. Now we're here. Next year we'll be in the land of Israel. Hashata avdei l'shana haba b'nei chorin. Now we're in servitude because in exile. This was we're in exile. L'shana haba b'nei chorin. Next year we'll be free. We'll be free people. Okay. So on a basic level, it's a nice way to start off the Seder. Invite the poor people in to join us. It's a nice thing. I remember you asked the question last time that in the times of the temple you actually had to have all your invitations for the Korban Pesach out before. So you couldn't. But actually, the Bet Din, the main court, would sort of buy spots and would pre-reserve spots for the poor people in general at people's seders. It didn't have to be exactly, but they would say, okay, we are now taking upon ourselves to invite, poor people to join in the seders. So everyone could invite a poor person, and it was sort of on their account. Okay, so technically it was taken care of by the Bet Din. So we're inviting people for a meal. On a little bit of a deeper level, we're inviting people to join in our spirit, in this sort of spiritual journey that we're going to take, this Seder. Whoever is wanting, not only wanting for a meal, but wanting for a Pesach, wanting for this sort of spiritual experience, redemption, we're inviting them to come join us. I want to focus on one thing. We started off this little piece we invite people to come and eat, this bread of affliction. Then we end off by saying, now we're in exile, next year we'll be free. It's like, what's the connection? I mean, we're inviting people to come in, so let's invite people. We'll talk about redemption and exile later on when we talk about the redemption from Egypt. What's the connection of redemption, in our future redemption with inviting people in for a meal? Anyone have any suggestions? I mean, I guess on a certain level you could say that in the merit of inviting people and the merit of tzedakah, like the prophets teach us, that then we'll be redeemed. The Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt out of tzedakah, helping people. But I want to take this a little bit deeper. In general, we know there's a lot that we have to get rid of the chametz. And according to the Torah, the way we do that is we do it with bittul. We nullify it just verbally, or in our hearts. We say, this bread, the bread in there no longer belongs to me. It's not mine, and therefore, the Torah says you can't own chametz. You can't eat it. You can't own it. So fine, I won't eat it, and it doesn't belong to me anymore. Anyone can take it. It's hefker. So technically that's enough. But the rabbis came along and said, well, you know what, maybe you'll forget that it's Pesach and you'll go in and make yourself a sandwich. So you have to get rid of it. Physically, you have to get rid of it. You have to destroy it. Throw it out. Give it away. Throw it out. Get rid of it.
You can hide it.
Well, you could... well, no, because that's why we have a bedika. The rabbi said you have to search your house for the chametz, because they know that Jews and food hiding will not help. If a Jew is hungry, they're going to turn over the whole house to find the food. So they want you to get rid of it. Now we
what I've never understood about selling the chametz is how do you get it back?
We buy it back from the Gentile. Now, technically, if the Gentile wants to pay all the money for the chametz, he has the right. He sort of has an option to do that, but usually they don't want to buy it. Also, we give him his money back, and we give him his deposit back, and we take back the chametz.
PayPal?
Maybe.
No, because I was looking online at Haggadah, and they were saying how you could sell your chametz online.
Right.
So basically, I didn't quite understand.
Right. Basically, what you're doing
is... It sounds like involved money.
You're making them an agent. You're making the rabbi your agent, and you have to fill out a form that says, it gives your address and where your chametz is. And, so they take that to the Gentile and say, here, okay, this is the chametz you're buying, it's in Yafa or whatever, and if you want it, you'll take it, but you have to pay the balance. If you take it, you have to pay the balance. Now chametz, we said that chametz, on a deeper level, chametz is the ego. Chametz is ga'ava. It's haughtiness. Because chametz is a rich food, it rises, bread rises. The matzah is a simple food. It has no yeast, there's no haughtiness in matzah. Matzah is humble. Chametz is haughty. Now, when a person feels that his ego, that I own things, it's all me, the money that I've made is all because I worked hard and I did well and
I'm in control of my destiny.
I'm in control. God has nothing to do with it, right? Then he has to be told. Then he has to either destroy his ego, or he has to get help. Someone else comes along and destroys his ego, or God comes along and destroys his ego. Really, it would be enough to be able to destroy your chametz in your heart, like the Torah says. You just say, it's not mine anymore. I don't own it. I destroy my ego. But the rabbis realized that it might be difficult for people to do it. And sometimes it is difficult to get rid of your chametz just, by yourself, like that. So sometimes it takes help, or unwanted help from God to get rid of our chametz. And that's what exile is. See, exile, in a spiritual sense, as long as we know that God is in control of everything, and God is everything, and then we're close to God. We're not in exile. There's no exile when there's total recognition of God. But when we forget, when we just focus on ourselves and on our own ego, we think that we're in control, that's exile. You see, that's what was going on in Egypt with the plagues. Pharaoh was in control, he thought. And God was trying to teach him that, you're not in control. And as soon as he finally realized that, and it took 10 plagues and the death of the firstborn, finally realized, then the redemption came. Once man accepted God's control, that I'm not in control, that God is control, then there was redemption, then there was Geula, then the exile was over, because exile is just distance. It's distance from God. What does that mean, distance from God? God is everywhere. It's not seeing God, it's seeing myself. I see myself. I'm God. I'm in charge. I control my life. I make decisions. God is not in this picture. But that's the chametz. That's the chametz. And God said, no, you have to destroy your chametz. This is a time when you destroy your chametz. And when we destroy our chametz, that's when we can be free. So that's why we're inviting people to come and join our Seder. We've destroyed our chametz. Now we're inviting them to eat matzah. We're inviting them to eat to join us in our humbleness. We have no ego anymore. We got rid of our ego. Now we just have matzah. And that's why we ended off by saying, when talking about the redemption, and that's why we're going to be free, because as long as we eat this matzah, then we're free. As long as we can get rid of, when we can get rid of our ego, when we can destroy our chametz, then our exile is over. Then we're free. So that's the connection between, and that's the beginning of this journey. It's a personal battle. That's on our mystical level. It's a battle for freedom. It's a journey to freedom. How do we get to this freedom? Well, we start off by destroying the chametz, by getting rid of our conception, that our false conception that somehow we have control over this life, and we decide what's going to happen to us. On a certain level, we do. We have free choice. We could decide. But we have guidelines to help us decide in the right direction. That's the Torah. And that's from God. So really, when we follow the Torah, we're following God. God's in control. Once we try to take control, the chametz, that's when we get into trouble. And that's where we get into the Mitzrayim, in this narrow place. It's all me. It's I. That's narrowness. So that's how we begin right away, by putting ourselves in a position to embark on this journey to true freedom. Now, the next thing we do is the Manishtana. That's the next main thing, the 4 questions. Now, in general, there are 2 ways of teaching and learning. One of them is just explaining, or just receiving the material, which is the way, I guess, in college, the professor comes up and lectures on the topic, and everyone sits there and listens to him. The other way is having a question, having your own question, and then trying to find an answer for that. I think the second way is much more powerful. And that's how I usually try to do this. That's how I like to learn myself. I like to have a question, something that really troubles me, and then I need to find an answer. So that's how the Seder is structured. That's how God told us to do this. When your son and your child will ask you, why did all this happen? Then you should tell him the story. And that's why we start off with questions, with 4 questions. It's a way of stimulating the mind, of having some reason to go forward and to learn this stuff, other than getting a grade or getting a diploma. We have questions, and we need to know the answers. Now, on our level, on our personal lives, because don't forget, we're in a big therapy session. The Seder is somehow we're trying to free ourselves. And it's very important to ask ourselves questions, and sometimes they're very difficult ones, in order to bring us to freedom. How am I, Manishtana, how is this night different than all other nights? Manishtana allows me to know this. How am I different now than I was 10 years ago? Have I learned anything? Have I grown? Why am I feeling bitter? What's this maror? Why is this maror all the time? Why am I feeling bitter? Chametz and matzah, we've already touched on that, the ego and other things. So, I'll leave the rest of it for you to think about. But if you don't ask yourself questions, then you'll always remain in Mitzrayim, in the narrow place. Because the only way you can grow and you can move to the next level is to say, what am I doing? What's going on? Am I the same? Am I moving? Am I growing? How is today, how is this night different than all other nights? And the answer is Avadim Hayinu, the power of Mitzrayim. That's the answer that's given, that we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Vayotzienu Hashem Elokeinu Misham Biyad Chazaka V'Zrana Tuyam. And Hashem, our God, took us out of there with a powerful hand, an outstretched arm. V'ilu lo hotzi HaKadosh Baruch Hu et Avoteinu Mitzrayim. If God hadn't taken our forefathers out of Egypt, Harei anu uvneinu uvnei baneinu meshubadim hayinu leFaro Mitzrayim. Then our children, and then we, us, and our children, and our grandchildren, all our generations would still be enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt. Now, I mean, first we'll start off on it's a simple level. I mean, eventually we would have gotten out of there. I mean, something would have happened. Eventually,
not necessarily.
Yeah, it's like in America. Eventually, times change, and people would get more. Slavery is bad, or the pharaohs died, or politics, or in some way, it's possible that we wouldn't. But it's very possible that after 1,000 years already, something would have happened. We would have.
But don't they teach us that we were at the final step before stepping off into assimilation?
Okay. So one way to look at it is that it's talking about, not just in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense. If God hadn't redeemed us at that point, then we just would have been lost in Egypt. We would have been assimilated. We would have spiritually enslaved forever. Along those lines, you see, even if we would have gotten out of Egypt, let's say Pharaoh decided, you know what, after a while, I'm going to let you guys out. Then in a way we would have been mishubad. We would have been indebted to Pharaoh forever. We said, oh, remember Pharaoh, he let us out of Egypt. And obviously that would sort of not go well with our whole faith. We needed God at this point in our history. We needed God to take us out, God to show His hand and to form us into who we are. Otherwise, it would have been Pharaoh political, something like that.
Well, because we were so close to assimilation, had we made that next step, there wouldn't have been anything to bring out. What's interesting also is that that God brought us out when we were so close to assimilation shows that the Exodus wasn't based upon any of our own merits.
Right. Okay. Now, getting to our personal level. So we start off trapped in this narrowness, the narrowness of Egypt, and the narrowness, I'll say, is also stress. It's also pressure. Narrow. We don't see the big picture, like we said before. We miss the important things. Narrow. We look at petty things, or little comments, or little things. We miss the big picture, the important things in life. So how do we get out of this? What's the answer to this? Well, the answer is we were slaves in Egypt, right? We were in the narrowness. God took us out with a strong hand, with a powerful hand. So basically we have two things. We have God, we have faith, and we have a powerful hand. And these are two ways for someone to break out of this narrow place that they're in. One of them is faith. which is for a Jew, I feel it's vital. It's a vital part of sort of breaking out of this sort of narrowness. Then life is more than just making money and doing this and that and the pettiness. That's narrowness, right? But once you have faith, then opens your head up to a whole big world. And look, it doesn't have to be for Jews. Our faith is this, but for other people, it could take other forms. It doesn't have to be. Not everyone has to be Jewish, right? But it's a sense of understanding that there's something bigger, there's something more important, there's something grander than this life I have, which might be very nice, but there's something more than that. And Yad Chazakah, it specifically says God took us out with a powerful hand, because in order to get out of this, sometimes we just have to force ourselves. We have to have a powerful hand for ourselves. Sometimes we need other people to help us, but sometimes it's us ourselves to break us out of this narrowness that we're in, and this routine, and this rote type of life. And sometimes it takes 30 years before we sort of finally slap ourselves and finally realize, like, wait a second, maybe there's more. Maybe I need to look a little bit further. So, Yad Chazakah. And the next thing it says that Vafilu kulanu chachamim, kulanu nevonim, kulanu zikenim, and even if we're all smart and intelligent and old and wise, we know the Torah, we know everything. It's a mitzvah to tell the story of this Exodus. And whoever talks a lot about the story is praiseworthy. Now, I think that's sort of obvious according to what we said. I mean, it doesn't matter how smart you are, or how bright you are, or anything you are, you could still be in Egypt. You could still be in the narrowness. And the point is to get out of it and to talk about it and to do this. And the more you do it, the more the praise, more praiseworthy you are. And then the Haggadah gives us some examples of wise people that, the greatest rabbis of the Talmud are going through this story, the Seder, the same story that we do every year. They do it also, and they actually give a couple of the examples are interesting, because one of them is Mas Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfa Shahayi Masud B'nei Brak. So they were right over here next door in B'nei Brak. All these rabbis. So even in those days, they had, the rabbis were living in B'nei Brak. And they told the story of the Exodus all night. The students came and said, "Oh, it's morning. It's time to say the Shema." And the second thing says also a question about whether you say the Shema, whether you have to remember Egypt at night and only in the day, and so they finally say that yes, you have to do it you don't do it at night; it's only in the day. And the sages say yes, you have to do it kol yimei chayecha, all your days, and even in the times of the Mashiach. So, I mean, on a simple level, the Haggadah is just giving us examples of smart people, and they also did it. So we can also, talk a lot about the Exodus. On a historical level, all these rabbis were living under Roman oppression, under Rome, and therefore the darkness here takes on a historical perspective. Like the oppression of Rome is the night, and yet they told the story of the Exodus throughout the night. And until their students came and said, it's morning, it's time to say the Shema. And morning represents the redemption, finally. So it's a historical story, and it's a story of hope. That if we continue to do this throughout the night, then we'll come to the morning where we say the Shema. The Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, we finally accept God. And on a personal level, like I said, night represents darkness. And we all know what darkness is when we feel darkness, depression, and things aren't clear. And yet the Haggadah says there's always hope. The morning is going to come, and we're going to have the Shema. We're going to say, so it's also sort of a little bit of chizuk, strengthening, as we go through our own personal journeys. And then we say something in Baruch HaMakom, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shalom Shalom Ma'ishan, Baruch Hu. Blessed is, HaMakom. Why do we call God HaMakom? God is the place. HaMakom. It's also it's a real place also, but HaMakom, right? God is called the place. Baruch HaMakom, blessed. We call God the place. So like we said before, there's a concept of tzimtzum, constriction, where God created a space, so to speak. He had to withdraw and hide in a way that the world could exist. And that's HaMakom, that's the place. It's the place that God created without, sort of hid, so that we can exist. Baruch HaMakom. And then the Torah, and then the Haggadah says there are 4 sons. They give us the 4 sons. And there are 4 sons. When the Torah says you should tell it, when your son will ask you a question, there are 4 different types of sons. There's a Chacham, a wise son, a Rasha, an evil son, Tam, a pure soul, not, maybe not the most intellectual, but good intentions. And She'eino Yodea L'Shol, doesn't even know the first thing, doesn't even know what to ask, doesn't know anything. And then the Haggadah tells us how to approach each of these sons. So, just quickly, the Chacham, the wise son, asks, what are all these laws and all these things that we're doing? I want to understand them. So you tell him Hilchah Pesach, you started teaching him the laws of Pesach. Ein maftirin achar haPesach afikomen. You don't eat anything after the afikomen. I mean, that's what you teach him. Not what I would consider to be the first thing you're going to teach him is the afikomen, the laws of the afikomen. So we said that afikomen means dessert. It was dessert, and then it's a Greek word. Some say it's a Greek word that means dessert. So if somebody comes to you and wants to learn about Judaism, right? So where are you going to start? What are you going to tell him? So you start with the sweet things. You start with the dessert. You're not going to start off and say, well, there are 39 things you can't do on Shabbat. There are like 500 things you can't eat. And you can't eat this. You can't do this. You can't. No, you're telling them the nice things. We light candles on Shabbat and Purim party, and we light Hanukkah candles, and you tell them the sweet things. So that's the afikomen. That's my own little thing. Rasha says, what is all this stuff that you're doing? And it says, Hakei Shinav, you break his teeth. And you said, because God took us out of Egypt. So that's a harsh.
What does this service mean to you, excluding himself?
Right. The Tom, innocent guy, says, what is this stuff? This is interesting. What is it? And you tell him that that God took us out with a powerful hand. The one that does not atptachlo. You approach him. You start explaining to him the story of Egypt. So on a basic level, I mean, the Haggadah, the Haggadah is a multimedia. The Seder, like I said, is a multimedia presentation to help us experience this redemption from Egypt and the story of Egypt. So the Haggadah is sort of discussing the educational methods of how you're supposed to approach different children, different people. And it tells us one of them, okay, the wise person, you want to tell him some of the laws, and someone who's totally cutting himself off, we want to be harsh with him, but we do give him an answer, so that it goes through different ways of approaching him. Now, I sort of want to do something interesting, and because we have 4 questions, and we have 4 sons, and they're connected. So
4 cups of wine.
4 cups of wine also. So I want to try to connect Manashtana, 4 questions, with the 4 different sons, and see what we come up with. Because we know that the 4 sons, on a personal level, it represents different aspects of ourselves. And sometimes we're Chacham, sometimes we're Rasha, sometimes we're Tam, and sometimes we don't even know what to do, what to ask. We're clueless. So the first question is Chametz. The first question, the Chacham asks the first question, and the Chacham is intellectual, right? He's asking about details. Intellectual. So what's the answer that we give him?
We teach him the details.
So the first question of the Manashtana is, why is, every time we eat chametz and matzah. Today we only eat matzah. That's the question of the Chacham. Because the Chacham is asking an intellectual question, details. Now what's the difference between chametz and matzah really? It's a minute, it's a second, right? The same ingredients go into both chametz and matzah. The only difference is a half a second. Once you cross the 18-minute point, then your matzah is now chametz. So the Chacham, that first question is the Chacham's question. And the Chacham's question is the intellectual question. So how do we answer? We answer him with details. We answer him with the laws. And we say, okay, matzah, it's only 18 minutes, but chametz is anything more than 18 minutes, so that makes it chametz. That's the answer. We give him details. Chametz, matzah. The Rasha, that's a simple one, because the second question is maror. So the Rasha is bitter. He's taking himself out of this whole thing. So how do we answer him? Okay, now, as I'm going through these, I'm going to take a step back because I want to go on the personal level also. So sometimes we have intellectual questions. We have intellectual dilemmas, details maybe about faith, about different things. That require intellectual answers. It's not always about feeling, it's not always about emotion. Sometimes it is about getting real answers. Sometimes it's intellectual. And so we have to deal with those issues, not ignore them, but deal with them in an intellectual way. So, I mean, if it's a question of faith, but if it's an intellectual question of faith, then we need to get real answers. We need to get intellectual answers, not just some some rabbi or whatever religion they are, some that says, oh, well, it's all beautiful because God created the world and it's all beautiful. No, sometimes we need intellectual, we need more understanding, we need more discussion. It's not always so simple. Different aspects of our life also. We might need practical answers, intellectual answers. The Rasha is bitter. All he sees is bad. Sometimes we're in that state where all we can see is just bad. Everything is bitter. Life is horrible. And so what's the answer to him? Hakechin of smash his teeth. Sometimes, there's no answer to that, but in order to even get an answer, we have to break out of this feeling of everything is bitter. We have to forcibly, take ourselves out of it. Get out of bed. Take a shower. Do something to snap yourself out of it. Hakei shinav, break his teeth. Now it gets a little more complicated because Tam is tumimut. I mean, it's innocence. It's purity. He's pure. And what's his question? His question is, all during the year we only dip once. And tonight we dip twice. See, dipping was a rich, the rich people dipped. So he only sees the good, the Tam. He's pure. All nights we always dip. It's always good. Tonight we dip twice. So the Tam is the person or the part of us that only sees the good. Naive. It's not always so good either. So how do we answer him? Biyad chazakah. Biyad b'chozik yad hotzianu Hashem mitzrayim. God took us out in force. So, this is a little bit more difficult to understand, but you're almost shaking him and saying, no, it's not all good. It's not, some people say it's all good, it's all good, it's all good. And you're saying, no, it's not all good. There's time for chozik yad also. There's time for being strong. There's time for saying no. There's time for resisting also. It's not all good. And the last one, she'eino yodea lishol. I'm going to sit down, ready? So the last one is not knowledgeable enough to even ask a question, right? On the specifics of the Seder. So what's the last question of the Manishtana? Sometime during the year, sometimes we lean, sometimes we don't lean, and today we always lean. So to me, that is the most visual, the most obvious thing in the Seder that really doesn't have to do with any of the props, any of the details of the Seder. No matzah, maror, all the other questions had something to do with a specific prop, a specific thing that we use that is associated with Pesach. That's very associated with Pesach. And the leaning, sometimes we lean, sometimes we don't lean. Today we always lean. It's the most basic question that you can ask. It doesn't relate necessarily to Pesach. It relates to freedom and the sense of total freedom and the sense of not freedom. Now, so I'll say that the question here is, why are we acting like we're all special now? We're all free. We're all special. When really we're not. I mean, throughout the rest of the year, okay, sometimes we're special, sometimes we're not special, sometimes we're okay, some people are okay, some people are not okay. But now suddenly we're all special. Everyone leans. We're all special. And in life also, I mean, there's good and there's bad. So what gives us the chutzpah, sort of, to say that we're all special? suddenly we're all special. The chosen people. And so what do we answer? So we answer, and we have to tell him the entire story of the Jewish people, of our heritage. Because somebody without a past, without heritage, is not going to feel special. Having this past, having this heritage, gives us a feeling of being special. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean better, like, oh, we're better, but we're special. We fit into a special thing. You know, like, you know, the guy, well, I don't know if the Dalai Lama has children, but you know, if the Dalai Lama had children, then somebody could say, wow, I'm from the Lama, the line of lamas, you know? And that's special. In fact, there's a story that's how I end the book I wrote on the Parshas. There's a story of this fellow who he lived in Arizona. He was a child of Tibetan refugees, and you know, he was already in university, and he was finishing university, and didn't really know what to do with his life, and no, he wasn't in Arizona. He was in India, and didn't have much of a hope of much of a great future. It was refugees in India, and then he got a letter in the mail. I think he might have gone to Arizona. I know Arizona's in this somehow, but he got a letter in the mail from some monastery in the southern Tibet, I think, saying that he was the reincarnation of a great warrior priest in Tibet, like 600 years ago, and it was a call for him to take his place. You know, I don't understand how that works, but they do. They discover, you know, a reincarnation of a Buddha or a Lama or something, and then this person becomes that figure, that holy figure. So he was that, and he went to the monastery, and he spent many years studying, and he became this Lama. So, you know, that letter was his destiny. You know, like, this is what I should be doing. Like, he wasn't sure, what should I be doing? Should I be a lawyer? Should I do this? A writer? Should I work a big farm? He had no idea. And then he got a letter that says, you're going to be a Lama. It would be great if we all got that letter telling us, this is what you're supposed to be doing. But in a way, we
got the Torah.
We do have the letter, exactly. We have the Torah. The Torah is also a 3,500-year-old document that says that you are part of a people. You are part of an ancient people, and you have a destiny. And that's what we tell. And that's what She'ein Yidei L'Shol, he doesn't realize that. So he doesn't understand, like, why is everyone so happy today? Why is everyone leaning? What are you so happy about? What are you so special? And we tell him, Ad P'tach Lo, you have to open up to him. You have to begin, and you have to tell him his history, tell him about his heritage, tell him about his people, and that's what makes you special. Now the next thing that happens here is, we go through all this excitement with the 4 sons, and then suddenly, the next thing is Yachol Mirosh, is a piece of Talmud. Yachol Mirosh Chodesh. When do we do all this stuff? When are we supposed to experience the Exodus from Egypt? You might think it's from Rosh Chodesh. Talmud Lama Yomahu. So the Talmud teaches us from a verse. No, the verse is Bayomahu, in this day. So what is it? Bayomahu Yachol Mibohim. Maybe if it's this day, maybe it's in the middle of the day. So now the Talmud Lama Bavur is because of this. So you have to have the matzah and mar in front of you, then you tell the story. Like, what's that doing here? It's a little technical, a piece of Talmud maybe to entice you. So, look, on a simple level, it's just telling you when you're supposed to do this stuff. But I think on a deeper level, you see, the question is, when are we supposed to experience this redemption? Okay? And sometimes we think redemption is, it's coming. It's here. Oh, any day now, any month. Maybe it's now. Okay, maybe it's later. Maybe it's this day. Maybe it's that day. The timing. It could happen at any time.
The matzah and the maror are two biblical commandments,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So and one of this, on the spiritual level, I guess, because you physically have this commandment in front of you, it's sort of opening up mazal.
Okay.
And that's why you're talking in front of it.
Okay. Yeah, that's what the Torah says, and the Pesach also is then. But I want to say that sometimes we think that redemption is coming, but we're not ready for it. And what does it mean to be ready for it? It means when your matzah and your maror are spread out in front of you. When your ego, because the matzah is the humbleness already, and the maror and all the problems and the bitterness and everything, when you can handle that, when you can have that in front of you and look at it and deal with your ego and deal with your maror, deal with your matzah, deal with your maror, deal with all of that, no, that's when the redemption is going to come. You might think you're ready for it before. Oh, I'm ready, I'm perfect, I'm ready. But you haven't dealt with your ego, and you haven't dealt with your issues and with your bitterness and with all that stuff. Then you might think it's going to happen this month, or maybe this day, or maybe that day. No, it's not up to you. It's only when you have this matzah and maror laid out in front of you and you can handle it, that's when you can experience the redemption. Now we're going over time, but Hareza Meshubach, whoever speaks a lot is praiseworthy. So then we start off with the story of our history. Mitchila Ovdei Avodah Zarah, our fathers were idol worshippers. If you have to go, don't worry about it. Yeah.
Because I haven't another point.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if you want to miss this stuff, no. You can look at the video. You can look at the video. Okay. So, by the way, have a Chag Sameach.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, you can ask me.
Yeah. Chag Sameach.
So Mitchila Ovdei Avodah, first we were idolaters, and now God's taking us back, and then we say a pasuk from Yeshua, Vayomer Yeshua al kol ha'am, and Yeshua said, and we have a whole quote from the book of Joshua that basically says that they were idol worshippers, and now we're okay. So, just a little question that I had, why take a verse from Joshua? I mean, we have like so many verses in the Torah that talk about idolatry and redemption, and all. Why a pasuk from Yeshua? Because Yeshua talks about when we finally came into Israel. And we were free already. We did it. We're redeemed. We have our own land. We have our own farms. We have everything. We had an army. Powerful army. This is it. And that's dafka. That's particularly when we have to remember where we came from. Because that's when we forget. When everything is great, when we're in control, then we forget about our past and we forget where we came from. And that affects how we deal with other people also. So don't forget. And in general, the Talmud says we start off bignut, bignai. We start off with sort of insulting material, with embarrassing stuff. We were idolaters, and then we work our way up to redemption. And that's And on a personal level, that's how sometimes you have to go through. You have to go deep down into the ganai, into the bad stuff, in order to get through it, to get to redemption. And then it goes through the story. At one point, Vihisha Amda, after this Vihisha Amda, we raise our cup, and we says, Vihisha Amda Lavateinu V'lanu, this is, she is what stood by us and our fathers, so the Vihi, some want to say it's the Torah, maybe you could say Emunah, also belief, our faith, because they always try to kill us, and God saves us. So we lift up our cup. It's sort of like a break in the action. It's doing something. It's lifting up the cup. We switch from this embarrassing, part of our idolatry and everything, and it might be too much for us to handle. So we go into a little bit of freedom. We lift up the cup. And then we go back to the story, which I'm just thinking maybe is also a way of, when we're working on ourselves, it's not always so good to dwell on the bad stuff and, work it through. And that's it. Yes, it's just good to take a break and think of the good things and a bit of freedom, and then go back to the work. We don't want to suffocate ourselves with that. All right, then we go through a lot of verses. The Haggadah goes through a lot of verses talking about our exile and our exile in Egypt. One of the things it says is that Vayihisham Lagoyim, we were like a nation there, and the Midrash says that the Jews didn't change their names, and they didn't change their language. They kept speaking Hebrew, and some say they didn't change their clothing. Others say they kept away from arayot, from the forbidden sexual things. So I want to just go quickly here because I don't want to. And then it says that Vayotzienu Hashem Mimitzrayim, that God took us out from Egypt, and then God says Ani v'lo malach, and I did this, and there are a couple of paragraphs that just keep repeating that God Himself did it. God and no other angels, no intermediaries, no nothing. And I think that it's a very important part of our nation, our faith, that our relationship with God is based on a direct connection. It's not based on any intermediary. This is the beginning of our nation, and it begins with God and us, direct, no intermediaries, no angels, no nothing. And that's our relationship with God. It's direct.
Also, like what you were saying before about how some rabbis would teach, just everything is wonderful and feel good, but sometimes you have to deal with the halakha, the facts.
Mm-hmm.
There's a point where what the story is getting to is that God actually took us out. I mean, it's almost like it's a historical thing. It's not just something that we have feelings about.
It's reality.
It's reality.
It's reality.
It transcends realities.
Yeah. Then we do the 10 plagues, and there's a custom to take out a drop of wine for each plague. Why is that? One thing I want to suggest is that the cup of wine represents freedom. I mean, that's why we drink the cups, right? Each cup is a sign of redemption, a different language of redemption that God used. So we can't enjoy our freedom totally along with the suffering of other people. And therefore,
it's like the song at the sea. We're not supposed to cheer,
right,
that everybody was,
right. We don't say Hallel. We don't say Hallel on the last days of Pesach.
We don't
say full Hallel. We don't say full Hallel because of that.
We're not joyful that our enemies are killed.
So we're taking out some of our freedom, and afterwards we fill up the cup again, because we are free, and it's a balance. After that, now I'm going to skip a little bit and come to Dayenu. And Dayenu that famous song that we all love to sing, which basically means it's enough. So if God just took us out of Egypt but didn't take us through the wilderness, it would have been enough. And if He took us through the wilderness and